Well, first off, Chris, thank you so much for helping me with my project. I was wondering if you could say a few words about yourself.
Sure, absolutely, buddy. So, Chris McCroskey, I live in Durango, Colorado, by way of Dallas, Texas. Have a software company, still based in Dallas, and one in Europe. So, Idealoop SK in Europe, Idealoop in Texas. We've got about 22 developers, and we build custom software for some of the biggest brands on the planet.
Mainly for mobile devices, right? The iPhone and the Android.
That's a big part of what we do, but a lot of what we do is kind of big SaaS based applications, improving efficiencies for large companies. So a lot of middleware. Yeah, mobile is a big part as well. Just solving problems for big companies, and software is our tool.
They definitely have a lot of big problems to solve.
Yeah, I think this whole coronavirus thing has exposed a lot of inefficiencies, right? As far as software and process is concerned, especially in the government.
And so, just kind of moving to kind of like what I'm doing with this project, I was wondering, did you know that NASA is planning to send people to the moon in 2024?
I did. I did know. I'm a little bit of a space geek, and have been since I was a kid. During this time we were packing up a lot of stuff and putting stuff into storage, and I came across my scrapbook from when I was a kid. I had stuff from the Challenger disaster and those types of things. Newspaper clippings, but stuff about the Voyager probe, and something that I've always been interested in, and have always wanted to go to space, man. I mean, hopefully, right? Fingers crossed that in my lifetime I get to step on the moon. If I don't, then cremate me and send my ashes up into space. That's kind of the plan.
That's awesome. Do you remember what got you into space?
Man, probably Star Trek, right? Growing up, Star Trek, and then Star Trek Next Generation. Science was always something I was in love with as a kid, and I just thought, I mean, those guys were heroes to me, right? I mean, to me, as far as the combination, I was an athlete in college, and did those things, but growing up, to see guys that are so well-rounded, right? Ridiculously smart, and physically capable as well. I mean, the best of the best. I mean, if you really look at what happened during the Apollo program, I mean, those guys were studs all the way around, right? They weren't, hey, I'm just a brainiac or whatever. They were extremely well-rounded individuals, and that's something that I think has always drawn me in that direction.
And very stoic too. I mean, the ship could be flying apart around them. They're like, I believe something is wrong. We should deal with it.
Right. Absolutely. You look at Lovell and those guys, the things that they went through, and just nerves of steel, man. And I think a lot of that comes out of the culture of, a lot of those guys were test pilots, right? You're a special individual to do, the things that those guys did, and untested, jet fighters, and those types of things, pushing new technology and engineering to the limits, to have that type of nerve and grit, as well as smarts to go along with it. Extremely impressive. Something that I've always aspired to, and only very few people can do what those guys have done.
And we have a couple of them doing it this Wednesday with the SpaceX launch of the Crew Dragon.
Absolutely, man. I'm really excited about that. Again, I mentioned the Challenger earlier, right? We've had these, these long periods in our history as far as space is concerned of, downtime, where we've had tragedies and engineering mistakes, and then we put things on hold and don't move forward. I understand all of those things as far as safety of our crews, our best and brightest being paramount. But I also know that those guys, are able to handle a degree of risk, right? I mean, they were test pilots, so it's always been something that bothered me, especially during the time that we were using the Russians to send up our stuff and our astronauts. I'm like, maybe it's because I'm a child of the Cold War or whatever. It just never sat well with me that we weren't doing it ourselves. So I'm super excited that for the first time since 2011, we're sending back up our astronauts on our equipment, and what a really exciting time as far as this disruptor that Tesla and Musk and SpaceX has become. I mean, all the way down to the suits. Have you seen those things?
Oh, I know. They look like something from like Power Rangers or.
Right. Finally, right? All the stuff that we've dreamed about watching on science fiction, and you're starting to see in real application. So I'm really excited about it.
And a couple other kind of statistics about this Wednesday's test flight was, and I just saw this recently, was that this is the first time we've tested a crewed vehicle in the U.S. since 1981. Like the last time that we tested launch a vehicle capable of launching astronauts with astronauts was the first time the shuttle went up. And this would be the first time ever that we've actually had a commercial vehicle where you and I could, buy a seat to it. I think you with your company might be a little bit closer than I am, but.
Yeah, and I need to start a fund, right? So by the time I'm 65, I've got some excess cash laying around where I can buy one of these flights. But just really exciting in the direction that it's heading, right? I mean, you're a software developer. You've been a part of this world, seen the innovation that's happened since we were kids. I mean, unbelievable leaps in technology. I mean, that what everyone carries around today and takes for granted, these computers that we have in our hands, unbelievable. We're science fiction when we were growing up, right? I mean, I've got this watch on, science fiction. But we haven't seen that same type of innovation or advances as far as space exploration is concerned. Not that we don't have the technical expertise to do it. I just don't know if we had the political will to do it. And now that, maybe we'll be pushed through private enterprise and competition, the government being, there to help with funding as far as who can do it the best, who can do it the safest, and who can do it the most cost effective, I think makes perfect sense.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think what you talked about with the computer, we pay for success. We buy the faster computer, the better computer, the more efficient computer, the better value computer. But in aerospace, you pay for effort, and ultimately you're paying for votes, which often means being less efficient and using more older technology, already established firms. So you don't have that same kind of like driver.
Right.
So I suppose you've been following what SpaceX has been doing in Boca Chica, Texas, near Brownsville with the Starship.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, pretty interesting stuff, man. As well, what is it? Virgin that's got Spaceport USA in New Mexico. I mean, those are all all really exciting things as far as where we're headed. I mean, how cool would it be, right? 20 years from now, 30 years from now, where you're seeing multiple launches a day, and we're actually making an effort to normalize or colonize space where where we should be as a species, right? Really interesting stuff, and what those guys have done in a short amount of time, unbelievable. It really reminds me of the type of innovation and the hard work that happened in the 1960s.
Yeah, exactly. With a quick iteration, I mean, they're just testing Starship SN4, and you can already see SN6 being built. And they're talking about being able to take the exact same Starship and launch it 3 times a day, and have a factory that could produce 2 of them per week. And
Right.
Whenever you do the numbers on that, I mean, literally within 1 week of operation, you would be able to launch more than we've ever have in combination of the sum total of human race.
Yeah.
Just mind blowing.
Right.
So are your kids interested in space also?
They are, yeah. Actually, my oldest went to space camp 2 years ago. We had, I think, 12 kids from Durango that went to space camp, and I helped do some fundraising around that, but that was one of my dreams as a kid, growing up, was to go to space camp, and it just wasn't in the cards for me as far as where my family was economically, and I had other things going on as well, playing lots of baseball every summer, and all through the summer, but something I always wanted to do. So as soon as my oldest was old enough, and he showed interest, I was like, absolutely, we'll do whatever it takes to get you there. And he had a great time. His plan is to go back next year. He'll be 15, so that means that he gets to go into the more intense program. They expect a lot more out of him, and it's a lot more academic work and those types of things. So, that program, that camp is changing as well with the technology. They're really keeping up, and I think they know that the groups of kids that they have coming through right now are the kids who are going to be astronauts when we go to Mars. So, I mean, they're in a unique position as well, that they're grooming, this generation that we're going to send to Mars. So, they're all pretty interested. My oldest more than all the rest, but we've got the telescopes, and we talk about space, and luckily we live out in the country here, so we can actually see the Milky Way, and we've got great viewing as well. So it's good stuff.
Well, and not everybody is as excited as you and I are about space. Some people look at the billions that will be spent getting people to the moon, and they look at what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX, and they're like, if you would just take all that and work on solving problems here on Earth, like poverty and healthcare and the environment and things like that, those should be like done first. And I was wondering, how would you kind of talk to people about that?
Man, I would tell you that, for one, right, we know that innovation comes out of, what we've done with the space program. It's made all our lives better. From, the chip technology that we have in our phones, right? That was all pushed, early on through, our space program, to all kinds of different technologies that we have. But I think the biggest thing is that collectively it brings us together, right? Either as a nation, that we have a shared goal, that we have shared accomplishments. And I think that's one of the things that we've really been missing. And we're separated because of those things. Even now, during, this lockdown where we truly are separated, right? We're not out because we're social distancing and those types of things, that we need something that brings us together as a collective, that we can all root for. We get it, partially with, the NFL season or Major League Baseball to a degree, or, the Olympics. Let's say it's the Olympics, right? We all kind of come together, even if you don't care about the 100-meter, sprints, or, the 400-meter butterfly or whatever it may be. You root for that guy because, they're, or girl, because they're an American, right? The Women's World Cup. I'm not a soccer fan, but I was watching those games because it's something that collectively brought us together. And I think that, that we need that, as opposed to all of the things, as far as, the things that you mentioned, which are extremely hard. They're very political as well. And I think this is something that can be apolitical. It is our achievement. And when I say our, right, usually for me, it's in the context of the United States, but this is important for the human race, right? For us globally, this is important. And I think you have to have those things. Without those things, then you're just mired in the, a lot of issues that we can't solve, right? Through engineering, we haven't solved poverty. Well, now, has poverty gotten better, throughout the world over the last 100 years? Absolutely. But it is an issue that's been with, the human race since we've been a human race. Using our national resources and global resources to do things that I think expand our consciousness of what we actually can be. I don't think there's anything else in the world that does that, other than us leaving this planet and spreading out to different bodies in our solar system, and who knows, right, beyond that. So that's kind of my thought on that, man. I think it's imperative. I think it's something that you have to have.
I definitely agree with you. That's part of my motivation with this project is try to raise awareness and kind of pick apart like different people's feelings on the issue to kind of better, uh, you know, connect with people on wherever they're coming from. Now, you mentioned as expanding out beyond Earth to other places in the solar system. Kind of, what do you see as being the most realistic time frame of that happening?
Uh, you know, I'm not really sure, Nathan. Right? I mean, if you look at what we've done just with computing, right, in the last 30 years. I think if you go back and you ask someone in the 1970s, to imagine the types of devices, the man on the street, right? Uh, no way you predict where we are today as far as that technology is concerned. And I think you're seeing a paradigm shift right now with new players coming in, disrupting, innovating. That I don't know if you can really put a timeline on it, because who knows what happens as far as, for one, our computing capacity, machine learning, AI, those types of things. The engineering stuff that we've got going on with 3D printing and exotic materials that we're developing. Is it one of those moments where you have that paradigm shift where you're like, hey, this is how it was done until now, and now it just, right, no pun intended, takes off like a rocket, and it changes timelines incredibly. Where really right now, up until today, even we're still working on a model that was developed in the 1960s, and those models were dreamed up in the 1940s. I think that there are things that are coming, right, where we're coming to this inflection point where we could see timelines accelerated drastically. And I hope that's the case, right? Because, I'm 43 now. I need it to accelerate drastically, just for the dream of me going, whether I ever go or not, the dream of me going, but, also for, my kids and their kids, as far as, at least having the option, that's something that we become more than what we are now. So what about you? What are your thoughts as far as, I mean, this is something that you're heavily involved in, and you think a lot about. What are your thoughts around, where we're going to be in 2040, 20 years from now?
I, I almost feel like it all comes down to the development of the SpaceX Starship. Like, if he is able to create a 100% reusable spacecraft that's able to carry 100 tons to orbit routinely over and over and over again, and it's safe and as efficient as they're hoping it could be. I mean, I see that as like sort of like the developing like the 747. It's hard to imagine going from like the single engine or the single person airplane to like the 747. I mean, if all you have is like the single person airplane and you're like telling people about airports and about how they'll have to run from here to here to get their gates and to make the next connecting flight, they'll have no clue what you're talking about. But then like today, everybody takes it for granted. So I I I think it's the development of that ultimately changes things. I think without that, it's just sort of still an incremental continuing everything that we've been doing, and there's really no big change. Maybe
Sure.
something else to come along, but um, that's where my hopes are pinned.
Yeah. So we were on a cruise, last November. And we're in the Caribbean, and I was telling my son, about the golden age of piracy, right? And what was going on, the different, political factions as far as the Spanish and the English, and to some degree the French, and those. And I'm like, look, this was just 120 years ago, 140 years ago, and back, right, where it was this technology up until this point, and then everything changed. And now 140, 150 years later, we've got 5,000 people on this cruise ship that can operate indefinitely, generates its own water. I mean, how miserable it was for those people before, right? And these these sailors for, the British Navy and the Spanish Navy. And here I am in, this beautiful cabin with unbelievable food, perfectly comfortable and safe. And there are 5,000 other people. Man, if we could see that, happen with space travel, exactly, like what you were talking about with airports and those types of things, um, you know, that would be pretty amazing. And I don't see any reason why not. I actually think that we've wasted, right, 60 years,
Yeah.
of, what, why aren't we here, right? I mean, 60 years that we should have been a lot further along, by now than we are. But hopefully, right, all of those things laid the base and the process for being able to explode from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference now is we have rich internet billionaires that have the dream of space, and they could care less about making those companies profitable than actually achieving their end result, as opposed to having companies that are like, how can I maximize profit for my shareholders? And what do I have to do from like a marketing and a PR and a political standpoint to get the government contracts and have it come my way? I mean, they drive completely different behavior, and that behavior drives completely different results. So
Right.
um, yeah, it's almost like maybe it'd be good if NASA managed prizes instead of actually doing a lot of the engineering and owning themselves.
Right. Yeah. Why not? Why not be the judge, right? The arbiter of, who's bringing this great technology to bear, and then awarding those things meritocracy, right? If you kind of look back at, some of the things as far as the shuttle program was concerned, right? I mean, there were a lot of politics involved in the design and engineering of the space shuttle, which never should have happened. It was politics. Let's take that out and let's treat it like sports, right? Like, hey, if you can play shortstop for the New York Yankees, then you can play shortstop, right? It's not, well, does he do this, and is he that? No, that guy can play, right? That other guy can't play. And I think that's where we need to be as far as space, and NASA could be that, that organization that pushes that forward, because I really think, and I think you've already seen parts of this as far as the bureaucracy, and again, I love NASA and I love what they've done in the history, but you can see where bureaucrats infiltrated NASA to the degree that you could never reproduce what happened in the 1960s in the 1980s. Just
Right.
couldn't do it, right? And so engineers and scientists who are doers and want to innovate, and they want to, they want to go to Mars. Well, they're not going to be at NASA. They're going to be at somewhere else. They're going to be at JBL, or they're going to be at, at SpaceX. So, do what you're good at, with the great industry knowledge that you've got, and, let these other companies do what they're good at. And let's make it better for everybody at that point.
What do you think we need to do now in order to sort of make that future where we are exploding out into the solar system, and maybe expanding is a more friendly word,
Right.
since rockets and exploding aren't so good. What do you think we should be doing now? I mean, I feel like our kids in like public education, it almost seems like we're wasting the vast majority of their talents. Like they pretty much go there for daycare. They're not really pushed to their potential. They're taught things in kind of like an abstract way, not in actually a practical way of solving problems. They seem completely disconnected with the realities of what it would take to push humanity forward. And I was wondering, is that just kind of like my own little view of the world, or do you also see that issue?
Absolutely. I call it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, right? The tyranny of low expectations. Our kids are capable of so much more, right? And can be pushed, into, advanced curriculum, if they understand how it applies, and if you keep them interested and engaged, turned on, by these types of things. So, one of the things that I look at is, with youth sports, right? I'm a big sports guy. I played sports, all the way through, my education, and all of the opportunities that I had to go to camps, to do this, play in this tournament, fully funded by my city, by my school, all of these things to be able to have these opportunities. But then you've got kids who are gifted, right? Like, I was a pretty gifted baseball player just because I could throw a ball really hard. But you've got kids who are gifted at science and engineering and these types of things that don't have the same opportunity to express that gift like I had in sports. So, where are the, robotics camps? And I know there are some, but they're not prevalent like youth sports are. Where are the competitions for these kids to go to and compete against other kids, which pushes them to work harder and delve into, deeper, more, stringent disciplines as far as, science, math, engineering, all of these things are concerned, that infrastructure is not there like it is for youth sports. And, the deal with youth sports is you're like, hey, this is great. And it's really good for kids. They learn a lot of character. They learn about themselves. They learn to work hard. They learn these things. But less than 1%, make it to the collegiate level. And then from there, it's even lower as far as the professional level is concerned. But all of the human capital that we, and I hate to say waste, but I would say that we don't cultivate, in science and engineering is right there. I mean, it is there for us. We just have to create a new infrastructure to be able to support that and keep those kids, turned on. So that's definitely my thought. We can do so much better.
Yeah, I know. As you were talking about that, I was thinking we have like the YMCA, they have like the little soccer thing, but you don't really have like weekend robotics or what have you. And it should be like done with, like, to solve maybe even practical problems like picking up trash on the side of the road or managing a garden or, uh, you know, maybe building dog houses. I don't know, whatever.
Right.
So, well, I really appreciate your time, Chris. I was wondering if you had
Absolutely.
any additional words in closing.
Man, I think the biggest thing is that we stop dreaming, right, on where we can go and what we can do, as a people, and I mean that as far as the human race is concerned, as far as we can do so much more than we're doing right now, and when we do those things, I think it breaks down lots of barriers as far as who we are, as a human race, where we're so divided and tribalized purposely to a degree that we have to have these big unifying events as far as a race, who we are, the human race, and if that starts through, hey, I'm proud of my nation because we're doing this, and then that spurs, the space race, right? I mean, here were two competing ideologies, that were diametrically opposed, but what it got us. Now think if we can do those things in friendly competition with other nations that push each other to advance. Man, I think that's what we have to have, and that we can always get better. Life is unbelievably easier and better than it was 100 years ago. People always want to talk about the good old days. Well, I spent about 6 hours on a horse in the mountains a couple of weeks ago. That's not great, right? Beautiful, you get to see some stuff, but the things that we have, the advancements that we've had, we can always get better, make things better, and it's going to take space, right? It's going to take, you look at Musk and what he's doing with battery technology, with solar, all of these things where people are like, man, that guy is, he's going to make billions and all this stuff. He's doing all this stuff where he can have this technology go to Mars, right? Hey, I've got to improve solar technology so I can create settlements on Mars. I've got to have battery technology. So right now I'll put it in cars. Great. Awesome. Right. Whatever benefits that we get here, fantastic. But all that technology is geared for going to Mars, right? Then SpaceX with the rockets that we build and the reusability to lower the costs, all geared for going to Mars. So, is to keep thinking that things can be better and that we can be more than what we are now.
And Elon has two other companies that don't get much attention. The Boring Company, that's drilling
Sure.
the holes underneath the Earth. I mean, talk
Right.
about something we'll need on Mars, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
then um, Neuralink, where they're actually putting probes in the brain and trying to expand mental function and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So exciting times, buddy. I appreciate it. You having me on.
Well, thank you so much. Well, you enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day, and I hope I hope to cheer us moving forward in our lifetime. Maybe someday we'll take a co-space vacation.
Yeah, man, that would be fantastic. It's a great project. Keep it up, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Chris.
Bye bye.